We've just about completed knitting our upper band. The next row is a purl row, and when we knit along this row we're going to attach it to the cast on edge. To do this you need to identify the cast on edge, and to make it easier to knit the cast on edge together with the purl row, I'm going to pick up the stitches using a small double pointed needle. This is probably about 2.5 millimeters. So starting with the first stitch, which tends to curl around the corner, we're just going to pick up the cast on edge. Let's just zoom in a little bit closer. So you can see I'm just picking up the little bump that's at the top of each stitch. That forms part of the cast on edge. Now we're going to purl our 2 rows of stitches together. We start by bringing the needle through the stitch at the back and then bring the needle through the stitch at the front. Loop the yarn around the needle, then one at a time bring that loop of yarn through and slip the stitch off. And repeat along the row. Needle through the back stitch, needle through the front stitch, bring the yarn over, pull the loop through the front stitch and off, and through the back stitch and off. Another way is just to place one stitch on your needle at a time, which you may find a little easier. So we're going to bring our needle through the live stitch, then we identify the loop with our double pointed needle and purl the loop. Just gives you a bit more flexibility of your additional needle. Let's have a look at that again. So we have worked along our row, and this is what the wrong side looks like when we've completed it. And this is what the right side looks like of our upper facing band. We've knitted our back facing, which is going to sit behind the lower back facing like so, and we're going to be joining the ends to our front and returning to knitting in the round. I've placed my stitches back onto my long circular needle because we'll be knitting this using the magic loop. Because we will no longer have a seam at the side, we're going to reduce the first and the last stitch of the row and go back to 50 stitches. Now our first decrease is going to be a knit 2 together, and let's have a look at what that looks like. So rather than placing our needle through one knit stitch like so, we're going to place our needle first through the second stitch on the left hand needle and then through the first stitch. With our yarn, we'll knit those two together. If you look at that closely, what you can see is that the second stitch sits over the first stitch. We'll then knit along the row, and then at the end of the row we'll do a slightly different decrease. When you have 2 stitches remaining, we need to reduce this to 1 stitch, and so we're going to do what's called a slip slip knit. For a slip slip knit, what we're going to do is slip each stitch knitwise, like so. I'm just going to put those back on the needle and show you again. When you slip a stitch, it's possible to slip it in 2 ways. One is knitwise, where you're passing the needle through the front of the stitch. The other is purlwise, when you're passing the needle from the back of the stitch, as if you were going to purl a stitch. For a slip slip knit, pass your needle knitwise. So we're going to slip, slip, and then we're going to knit the stitches through the back loop. To do that, take your left hand needle and pass it through the stitches like so. Pass the yarn around your right hand needle and bring that loop through. If you look at the stitch, what you can see is that the first stitch that was on your left hand needle sits above the second stitch. So it makes the outer stitch disappear. Now we're going to join our front band facing and knit in the round. So here's our back facing here, and we'll just check we've got it round the right way. This will tuck inside the upper, the lower facing. Place a marker and then just keep knitting. Across the facing. We've now knitted across the back facing, and we want to join in the round back to the front. Now to do this, we'll need to create our magic loop. Using the marker as a guide is a good place to create your loop. So place the stitches you're about to knit back onto the needle by pulling the cable to the left, and we'll do that at the point of the marker. slide the stitches back onto the needle, and with the other needle tip place the back stitches onto the cable. Turn your needle round and continue knitting in the round. So we'll place our marker and we'll keep knitting in the round. Just make sure when you're starting your next row that you keep your yarn nice and taut so that there isn't a large gap between the front and the back of your knitting. There we go. Next row. Keep knitting in the round, following the pattern, and when it comes to your decrease rows, you're going to be doing either knit two together, like we described earlier, or a slip slip knit, which you've also seen. So now you've got everything you need to continue knitting and complete your Take Heart Hottie. Feel free to post a picture and remember to tag me in Conexus Knits on Instagram or Facebook. I'd love to see some photos of your own projects.